The day I turned 67, my son-in-law called me a loose end. He didn't know I heard him. That morning, I woke up before the alarm, the way I always do now. My wife Pauline used to tease me about it. Said I had a rooster living in my chest. She's been gone 4 years, and I still wake up at the same time, still reach for her side of the bed before I remember. The house on Clover Mill Road has 9 rooms. I rattle around in most of them. My daughter Simone had insisted on a birthday dinner. Her place, not mine. She said it would be easier, said she didn't want me fussing over a clean kitchen. I thought that was thoughtful of her. I drove over at 6, brought a bottle of wine I'd been saving, felt almost normal for the first time in a while. Simone had married a man named Fletcher about 3 years before Pauline passed. I tried to like him. I genuinely tried. He worked in commercial real estate, knew the price of everything, had opinions about wine he'd never actually tasted and restaurants he'd never actually been to. But Simone loved him, and she was my daughter, so I kept my mouth shut and shook his hand and called him son. Dinner was good. Simone made the pot roast Pauline used to make, which hit me somewhere behind the sternum when I first smelled it from the hallway. We ate, we talked. Fletcher asked how the investments were doing. I said fine. He laughed like that was a funny answer. I noticed he kept coming back to the subject, circling it, the way a dog circles a spot on the carpet before it lies down. I excused myself to use the bathroom. The house is long and narrow, a railroad layout, and the bathroom down the hall puts you right next to the kitchen with nothing but drywall between you. I heard them before I even reached the door. Fletcher's voice, low, a little impatient. The account alone is worth more than our mortgage. If we get the transfer authorization set up before the end of the year, we control the timing. Simone, quieter. You ask questions. Fletcher, then you handle him. You're good at that. Keep him talking about Pauline, about the old days. He zones out. I stood very still in the hallway. The wallpaper there has a small pattern of leaves, green and tan. I stared at one leaf until it stopped looking like a leaf. He trusts me, Simone said. There was something in her voice I couldn't name. Not guilt, exactly. More like she was reminding herself of a useful fact. That's the whole point, Fletcher said. I used the bathroom. I washed my hands. I looked at myself in the mirror above their sink, the one with the little shells glued around the frame that Simone had made in a craft class years ago. I looked at the man looking back at me. 67 years old, retired electrician, 31 years with the county, widower, father, apparently a loose end. I went back and finished the pot roast. I complimented Simone on the seasoning. I thanked Fletcher for the evening. I drove home on Route 9 with the windows down even though it was October because I needed the cold air on my face. I did not sleep. I want to be clear about something. I am not a suspicious man by nature. I believed for most of my life that family meant something you didn't have to protect yourself from. Pauline and I had our disagreements. Our finances were simple. We saved, we lived within our means. We put Simone through 2 years of community college and helped her with the rest. When Pauline got sick, we spent some of what we'd saved, but not all of it. The house was paid off. The retirement accounts were solid. A modest life, but ours. After Pauline died, the financial advisor at the credit union suggested I consolidate. I had accounts in 3 different places. Some CDs, a money market, the old pension from the county. He helped me pull it together. The total, when I saw it on paper, surprised even me. Pauline had been careful. I hadn't known how careful. I think Simone found out around that time. I don't know exactly when or how. Maybe the advisor mentioned something. Maybe she saw a statement. But I remember a shift. She started calling more often. Started bringing Fletcher to Sunday dinners when she used to come alone. Started steering conversations toward the future. Toward whether I'd thought about an estate plan. Whether I had a will. Whether I'd considered making things easier for her if something happened to me. I told her I had a will. She asked if it was recent. I said recent enough. What I didn't tell her was that 2 weeks before my birthday dinner, I had sat in the office of a man named Harold Jessup, an estate planning attorney in Bridgewater, and I had asked him a question. The question was, if someone I loved was moving towards something I couldn't prove yet, what could I do right now to protect what Pauline and I had built? Harold didn't blink. He had been doing this for 30 years. He said he heard some version of this question more than people would think. We talked for 2 hours. I left with a plan. The week after my birthday, Simone called and said she and Fletcher wanted to take me to lunch. I said sure. We went to a diner in town, the kind with the laminated menus and the pie case by the register. Fletcher ordered the club sandwich and ate half of it, which I noticed because it seemed wasteful. They brought up the idea of a financial power of attorney. Fletcher explained it carefully, like he was doing me a favor. Said it would just mean that if anything ever happened to me, if I got sick or had an accident, Simone could manage things without any court delays. He said, for your protection, twice. He said, peace of mind, once. He had the paperwork in his jacket. I said I needed to think about it. Fletcher's jaw tightened, just slightly. He smiled through it. Of course, take your time. I ordered the apple pie and asked Simone how her friend Tracy was doing, the one from her old job. Simone looked briefly lost, then answered. Fletcher folded the paperwork and put it back in his jacket. What I was thinking about while we talked about Tracy was this. 4 days earlier, Harold Jessup had filed the documents establishing the Clover Mill Revocable Trust. Every account, the house, the CD ladder Pauline had built over 15 years, all of it was now held by the trust. I was the trustee. My brother Douglas in Knoxville and Harold himself were named as successor trustees. Simone was the beneficiary of the trust. A reasonable share. The kind of share a parent who loves their child leaves when they also know what that child has married. But Fletcher's name appeared nowhere. Not once. And a financial power of attorney signed by me personally would have had no authority over assets held by a trust. Over the next month, they tried 3 more times. A phone call from Simone where she cried a little, said she just worried about me being alone, said she wanted to make sure she could help me if she needed to. I listened and said I understood and that I was handling things. A Sunday visit where Fletcher brought brochures about a retirement community 2 counties over, very casual, left them on my coffee table like a magazine. A dinner where Simone mentioned an attorney she'd met through a friend, said he was great at elder planning. Wondered if I'd want to meet with him. I said I already had an attorney I trusted. Each time, I watched Fletcher's face. He was not a patient man. Patience requires accepting uncertainty, and Fletcher was allergic to uncertainty. He needed things to move. I could see the calculation behind his eyes, the slight recalculation each time I didn't cooperate. The way a man adjusts a math problem when one of the numbers keeps coming out wrong. In November, something changed. Simone called on a Tuesday, and her voice had a different quality. Warmer, more relaxed. She said she'd been thinking, and she didn't want to push, and could we just spend some time together? Just us, no agenda. I said of course. We had coffee at my kitchen table, and talked about her mother, about the early years, about a vacation we'd taken to the Outer Banks when Simone was 11, and it rained for 4 straight days, and we played Crazy Eights, and watched old movies and ate cereal for dinner. She laughed at that. I laughed too. When she left, she hugged me for a long time. I held on as long as she did. That evening, I called Harold. I told him what had happened. The warmth, the shift in approach, my instinct that something was moving. Harold said it might be nothing, might be genuine. Hard to say. He also said I should check my mail carefully for anything from financial institutions and consider putting a credit freeze on my accounts. I called the credit union the next morning. What the woman on the phone told me took me a few seconds to process. Someone had submitted a request 3 days prior to update the authorized contact information on 2 of my accounts. The request cited a power of attorney document. The credit union had flagged it because the accounts were now trust accounts, and the paperwork submitted did not match the trust structure. They had not made the changes. but they had the paperwork. I asked her to read me the name on the document. It was my name. My signature, except I hadn't signed anything. I sat in the kitchen for a while after I hung up. The refrigerator hummed. Outside, someone's leaves were being mulched. I thought about Pauline, about how she used to say that the hardest thing in life was not knowing whether to trust the people you loved. I thought she'd been talking about other people's lives when she said that. I called Harold. Then I called Douglas. Then I called the non-emergency line for the Bridgewater Police Department. The detective who came to the house was a woman named Cortez. Thorough and unhurried, she took the information, asked good questions, explained the process. Document fraud, she said, was something they took seriously. She asked if I had any idea where the signature might have come from. I thought about the paperwork Fletcher had brought to the diner. The forms he'd slid across the table and then folded back up. I thought about the birthday dinner, the wine, the pot roast. How long had this been in the planning? The investigation moved slowly, the way investigations do. I won't go into everything because some of it is still being resolved, and Harold has asked me to be careful about what I say publicly. What I can say is this. The document submitted to the credit union was a fabrication. The signature had been copied from a real document I'd signed years earlier, something routine. Fletcher had access to that document through Simone. The credit union filed a report. The county prosecutor's office got involved. Fletcher retained an attorney in early December. Simone called me the night before Fletcher's first meeting with the prosecutor. She was crying, genuinely, not the managed kind from before. She said she hadn't known he was going to do that she thought it was just paperwork, that she hadn't understood what she was agreeing to help with. I don't know how much of that is true. I'm not sure she knows either. I said I hurt her. I said I loved her. I said there were going to be consequences and I couldn't stop them. And I wasn't sure I would even if I could. She cried harder. I stayed on the line until she stopped. In January, I put the house on Clover Mill Road on the market. Not because I had to, because I wanted to. 9 rooms is too many for one man with a rooster in his chest. I found a place in a smaller town about 40 minutes south. A 2-bedroom on a quiet street, single story, good bones. A porch that gets afternoon light. I paid cash from the trust. Harold handled the paperwork. I moved in on a Saturday. Douglas drove up from Knoxville and helped me carry boxes. We ordered pizza and sat on the floor of the living room because I didn't have furniture yet, just boxes and 2 folding chairs and the lamp Pauline bought at a garage sale in 2009 that she loved and I always thought was ugly, and now I would not give up for anything. Douglas asked how I was doing really. I told him I didn't know yet. I told him I thought I would be okay. I have a neighbor, an older woman named Frances, who brings her mail in with both hands because she gets a lot of catalogs. She waved to me the first morning I was there. The second morning, she left a plate of lemon bars on the porch. I knocked on her door to return the plate, and we talked for 40 minutes about nothing in particular. I thought about Pauline the whole drive home from my birthday dinner, about the way she would have handled what I heard in that hallway. She would have been hurt. She would have cried in private and been dignified in public. She would have consulted someone she trusted, and she would have protected what we built. That's what I did. I am 67 years old. My wife is gone. My daughter made choices I will spend a long time trying to understand. The house where I raised her sold in 11 days. The lamp is in the living room of the new place, next to the window that gets the afternoon light. It's ugly as ever. I've never been so glad to look at anything in my life. I've had a lot of time to think about what happened. That's one of the things nobody tells you about getting older. You end up with more time for thinking than you ever wanted. What I keep coming back to is this. Fletcher didn't fail because he was unlucky. He failed because of what he was. A man who looks at his wife's father and sees a balance sheet has already made a decision about what other people are worth. That decision has consequences. Not the dramatic kind you see in movies, not lightning striking from a clear sky. The quiet kind, The kind where one morning you're sitting across from a bank officer and the numbers don't match what you thought they'd be, and suddenly the whole plan you built on another person's trust turns out to have been built on nothing at all. I don't take pleasure in that. I want to say that clearly. There was no moment where I felt satisfaction. What I felt, mostly, was tired. And sad in a way that doesn't have a clean name. But I've also thought about what would have happened if I hadn't stood still in that hallway. If I hadn't heard what I heard and taken it seriously, the easy thing would have been to tell myself I'd misunderstood. That's what we do when the truth is too uncomfortable. We talk ourselves out of it. We say we're overreacting. We say family doesn't do that. We protect the story we want to be true, instead of looking straight at the one that is. I looked straight at it. That's the only thing I did right. Harold used to say that estate planning isn't about death, it's about clarity. Getting clear on what you have, what you built, who you trust, and why. I went to him not because I had proof of anything, just a feeling and a hallway and some words I wasn't supposed to hear. That was enough to act on. Not to accuse, not to confront, just to protect what Pauline and I had spent 30 years building together. That's what I want anyone to take from this, if they take anything. You don't have to wait until you have proof to be careful. Careful isn't the same as paranoid. It isn't the same as suspicious or cold or unloving. It's just paying attention, and then doing something with what you see. Simone is still my daughter. That's not a complicated statement, even if everything around it is. She made choices I don't fully understand and may never fully understand. But I think about her the way I think about most things now, with more patience than I used to have, and less certainty about what I know. Douglas asked me, the night we moved boxes, whether I was angry. I told him I didn't think anger was the right word anymore. What I was, I said, was awake, more awake than I'd been in years. That lamp of Pauline's is still ugly. Every morning I walk past it and I think of her, and I think of everything she was careful about so that I could be okay, and I think that the least I owe her is to stay awake too. That feels like enough to build on,